Tony Preckwinkle, chair of the Cook County Democratic Party, and this is our podcast, The 80, about the party, its candidates, and its leaders. We're beginning the podcast by interviewing our elected Democratic committee people to discuss their backgrounds and thoughts about the history and future of our party. And today we welcome Representative Kelly Cassidy, who is also a committee person. All right, tell us a little bit about yourself first and then about your ward.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I am a state representative as well as a committee person. I represent the 14th district, which is the smallest district in the state, also the tallest given all of our high rises. And it's comprised mostly of the 49th and 48th wards with a little bit of 40 and 47 and a little bit of Evanston mixed in. So it's a really nice, compact and incredibly diverse area. I live in the 49th ward, where I've been for almost 10 years and love the makeup of this community. It is, it's like the 93 XRT of neighborhoods. We've got everything in no particular order. And that makes it a really fun place to represent and to live and to work and to play. And our organization reflects that as well. I've been part of the ward organization since I came into office in 2011 and took over as committee person when Joe Moore resigned in 2019 and was elected to my first full term in 2020. So it's really been a fun and quick learning curve, and getting to know some of the committeemen and getting to know the different ways that committees operate has been really eye-opening for me.
All right, so the 49th ward is the northernmost ward in the city, right along the lakefront. Yep. Your district is the smallest and therefore the most densely populated. Is that the message? It
is. We've all got the same number of people. They just, some of us spread over multiple counties, and some of us, like me, just have a handful of L stops to traverse to get from one end to the other.
All right, that's pretty good. And as you say, it's a very diverse ward.
It is. Both the ward and the district are majority minority, but no single minority holds a majority. We literally have every possible ethnicity. We've been cited by some sources as having the highest refugee population in definitely in the state and in some cases the country. And it's in part because it's just such a welcoming community. The residents of this area really value that diversity, and that's a word that gets thrown around a lot and sometimes gets cheapened, I think, but it's really what we see when we walk around our community. There are folks from all over the world wearing their traditional garb, operating businesses that could just as easily be in their home countries, and bringing those resources and those wonderful experiences to us as neighbors. So it's a pretty cool place.
All right. Now, what about yourself? What was your journey to public life?
Well, I have joked that I am, very much in the category of nobody sent, because I grew up on a little island on the west coast of Florida with 1,500 registered voters. So when we're ready, we can take it. We've got the experience to pull that off. But I came here in the early 90s, started my work as legislative director for the National Organization for Women in the Chicago office, which is, I think, when I first met you, working for the amazing Sue Purrington.
Right.
From there, went to work on campaigns, worked with now former Senate President John Cullerton as his district office director, spent some time in the state's attorney's office. And when Harry Osterman was elected alderman of the 48th ward, another committeeman now, I was fortunate enough to be selected to be appointed to fill his vacancy from 25 applicants through an 8-hour public hearing. It was kind of an amazing first experience at this. But I've loved every possible moment of serving this community. I joke that I have the best district in the state. I have some of the most thoughtful, informed, and demanding in all the right ways constituents. So it's a really rewarding place to serve.
Tell us what you're most proud of in the state legislature, and then let's talk a little bit about your hopes for the Democratic Party.
Honestly, I've passed a lot of really big bills that could very easily be the thing I am most proud of. And in that category, passing the Reproductive Health Act at a time when it was most needed. We talked about it being a firewall, putting a firewall around Illinois to protect against what was the assault on Roe. I'm incredibly proud of that. But honestly,
why don't you share with us a little of the particulars of that? Because I'm not sure all of our listeners and viewers will be aware.
Sure. So in 2019, what we saw around the country was conservative states passing abortion bans or restrictions that were effective bans. And we've just seen the Supreme Court take up a case on a prohibition on abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy. Here in Illinois, we had a lot of outdated and archaic language in our code, but it was language that threatened these rights if and when, and it is a when Roe v. Wade falls. Abortion would have been criminalized. Both the patient and the physician would have been subject to felony charges. Spousal consent would have been back in play. The ultrasound mandates, waiting periods, all of these various restrictions that were passed when we didn't have a Democratic majority, but that had been enjoined by the courts, would have suddenly become law again. So we had to clean all of that stricken language out. But we went a step further, and we established that access to reproductive health care is a fundamental right in the state of Illinois. So we wanted to make very clear that no matter what the national scene does, Illinois will remain a pro-choice state. Access, we make Medicaid and state insurance funding available for abortion patients, and we went an additional step further to acknowledge that women aren't the only people who can get pregnant. We began that shift in language to acknowledge that anyone with a uterus can get pregnant, to make sure that and that's not just a symbolic act. That is ensuring that nobody runs into insurance issues. That is ensuring that nobody runs into workplace accommodation issues, for example. So really setting the stage that reproductive health care is health care. Prior to the passage of the RHA, abortion was regulated under the criminal code. Like, just take a moment and think about that. Like the footing that a person seeking an abortion in Illinois was under the criminal code. So we've moved it to the healthcare code where it belongs. And we've established that under no circumstances is that right going to be infringed in Illinois. So super, super proud of that. At the same time, the first bill I ever passed was the Good Samaritan Act that protects someone from prosecution if they seek help for someone experiencing an overdose. Within days of that bill becoming law, I got calls from 2 or 3 different families whose kids were alive because they knew that they could call 911 for help. Very rarely in your work life do you literally know you've saved a life. And so knowing that something that I did is made sure that 3 families remained intact is something I will carry with me forever.
Well, we're facing now a particular crisis around opioid usage, and this is addiction is a healthcare issue, not a criminal justice issue. Yeah. Abortion is a healthcare issue and not a criminal justice issue. So thank you for your good work in both of those arenas.
And your partnership in this over the years. You've been an amazing partner on those reforms, and I'm grateful to you.
Well, thank you. You've also been the sponsor of, I believe, the legalization of cannabis in the state. Is that correct? Tell us a little bit about that. How did that come?
I was. So we actually thought it was going to be about a 7-year project. We ended up getting it done in 6. But working with former Senator Heather Staines, House Majority Leader Jahan Gordon Booth, and former Senator Toy Hutchinson, during the Rauner years, when we had worked on medical cannabis, we worked on decriminalization, another piece that you were very helpful with. But we knew that the next step was to go to a regulated marketplace. But the 4 of us together under the Rauner administration knew that there was no chance he was going to sign it. So we had time to work with. We decided to use that as a runway to lay a really solid foundation in the hopes we would have a governor who would sign it, which we got in J.B. Pritzker. But we set out to do something that no state in the country had ever done successfully, which is to set up this marketplace through an equity lens. We're seeing some speed bumps and some hiccups in that, largely because we are building the plane as we fly it. We've seen other states try to do it, and the courts have thrown those models out. So we used a model that was cobbled together from reading the various court decisions, what we see around the country is folks have legalized. The cannabis industry, the existing industry, has sued to avoid any of the equity provisions. So we took those court decisions and developed this social equity model. Again, it's never been tried before. We knew there were going to be hiccups. The combination of the hiccups and the pandemic have us in a situation where we just passed a bill to do some cleanup and get some more licenses on the street more quickly, so that we can move away from this all-white industry that exists because of the way the medical bill was written. And so my hope is that by the end of this year, we'll start to see some progress on that.
Good. Well, the equity issue is one that continues to haunt the legalization.
It does.
So I'm glad that that's being addressed. All right, we've talked a lot about your legislative career. What do you hope to see from the Democratic Party, either here in Cook County or nationally, as we move forward?
So we're seeing a lot of change. I mean, here in Cook County, we saw a lot of new committeemen elected in the last round. Lots of folks who don't come out of a traditional party model. So it's been fun watching how we're all gonna work together. We've got a new leader at the state level, obviously, who's promising a lot of change after decades of leadership from former Speaker Madigan. So there's so much opportunity, and so much more opportunity for us to work collaboratively, that I'm excited to see where we can head with that. And in terms of at the county level, I think that the fact that we have so many different models gives us all an opportunity to learn from each other and to pick up new ideas and new techniques. The 49th Ward has been a membership-driven organization for a long time, meaning our endorsements are driven by the votes of our members, where we still have some organizations that are very top-down committeeman model. And so I think that we can all find ways that we can learn and pick up from each other different methods. Some of these newer committee folks can help some of us adapt and adopt new technology approaches and making more use of technology for example, as we hit the pandemic and suddenly couldn't hit the doors anymore, couldn't campaign in person anymore, the folks that were equipped digitally were able to pivot more quickly. So having us all learn more of that and be better equipped to take those pivots, I think is a great opportunity.
All right. What do you hope to see from the Biden administration, our Democratic president?
Well, there's a lot of cleaning up to do. I'm thrilled to see. I think it was yesterday they announced they're going to reverse the Trump administration's position and continue and return to protecting trans students in school settings, undoing some of those really horrible and harmful and hateful policies of the Trump administration. Unfortunately, they could spend all of their time fixing what they broke. My hope is that they find some time to make some advances as well. On the criminal justice reform front, on the cannabis front in particular, I would love to see descheduling at minimum happen so that these small businesses can have access to banking and loans. It's one of the biggest barriers to equity is access to banking and small business loans. It really has become an industry where if you don't have access to capital markets, you don't have access. So the traditional route where someone might start a business by starting at the SBA and at their local bank to get a small business loan is foreclosed to folks who don't have access to capital markets. So some of those changes at the national level would go a long way for those of us in the states who are trying to drive equity into the cannabis industry.
Any last words you want to leave us with, committee person and representative?
Really looking forward to how we all adapt to this new election cycle we're walking into, figuring out ways to address starting petitions in January. I would love for some of us to put our heads together and come up with some ideas to not squander the good weather this summer that we're going to have, to find ways to get people engaged in the campaigns before they even exist. I think that's going to be a big challenge for all of us as we, go from I feel like we all have sort of muscle memory for the campaign schedule, and now we've shifted it all so much to address the need to get the census data before the maps are finalized. I think that's going to be, again, it can be an opportunity. It can be a very fun opportunity to figure out new ways to use this time.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Representative Kelly Cassidy, for joining us for our podcast, The 80.
Thanks, Chairman.